Bonjour my fellow deadbeats. I hope you're all doing fantastically well, because I am. Now, today is a funny topic, and for this one, I need to adopt another way of speaking. Give me a second. Alright guys, let's try and fucking do it this way then. Today we're talking about the rapping rippers of Mori Calliope. But then, who's Mori Calliope? Well, as for the Guru, she's one of the Holomyth. She debuted in December 2020 and was the very first one to debut actually. So she may not be as friendly as our dear shark girl, but who needs to be when your name starts with Mori? Now, all of that being said, I believe stopping at that would be sad. There's more to say about the one we call Dad. Kelly is the very first apprentice of the Grim Reaper, but due to the ripping business becoming scarcer and medical care getting better, Mori decided to take the matter in her hand and to fare her own way. From Reaper to VTuber and rapper, Mori Calliope took over the stage and scythe in hand became the one we now call Father. Très bien. The introduction being done, I'd say I go back to my usual way and we get to business. I believe the logical course of action would be thus: her name, her look, and then where all of this come from. We already talked about the fact that Mori Calliope is a Grim Reaper, or Shinigami, and it all starts with her name, Mori Calliope. In Latin, Mori means to die. We all heard the line, Memento Mori, remember death. But this is not everything there is to this name, of course not. The word Calliope takes its roots in Greece. Indeed, Calliope means beautiful voice. Calli comes from kalos, which means beautiful, and from ops, which means voice. Calliope is the muse of eloquence and epic poetry. There are multiple equivalents to these muses, but the one we are looking at are from Greece, and they are all beautiful women, born from Zeus and Mnemosyne, and now they rule over the arts. And out of all of them, who's usually described as the greatest? You guessed it, I hope. Indeed, it is Calliope, the great nymph of poetry, most often described as a beautiful young woman crowned with gold. What a coincidence it is that in the very center of our dad's tiara would be a golden gem. All this being said, there are also other things to Calliope's look. Of course, let's examine her whole attire. The crown we covered already, but we missed some of it. The first thing that comes to the eyes, once the crown is done, is her veil. A veil. Now this one is a bit more up to debate. There are two theories that comes to my mind. The first one, of course, being the separation between life and death. The veil between the two worlds. A beautiful image indeed, and how fitting for a nymph to break the veil between life and death. If Calliope is associated to songs, she's not the only one of the nymph. In ancient Greece, the sirens are sea nymphs. The body of a bird and the head of a beautiful woman with a voice so beautiful that it would bring the sailors to their inevitable death. The second theory would be an inspiration from the Gaelic banshee, a woman usually found in graveyards, whose screams causes the person who hears it to die. Usually described with long hair, a long dress, bright red eyes, and of course a veil covering her head and hair. Fun fact, the banshee is probably the explanation that peoples of the old time found to death of old peoples. Let me explain quickly. Their screams are so loud that they causes the hair to grow white and they hang out around graveyards. As you grow old, you tend to stick around graveyard more often as you lose more and more people. And you also tend to grow white hair, then die. Easy. Now, the third and last explanation for this veil would come from a Jewish story. The story of the finger, or Shivar Shei Ahari. I'm sorry if you speak Hebrew and I've destroyed your language. I don't speak it and know about one word of it. Two, maybe. Anyways, this story talks about Rabbi Luria, who's less than lucky and places a ring on the branch of a tree. However, the branch was the corpse of a dead woman who now rises from her grave and declares him her husband. After some trials and tribulation, the man asserts control over his new bride, and then the Jewish court sides with the rabbi and declares this marriage couldn't be legitimate, and the bride falls into a pile of dust. But still, what is the thing that most brides have in common? A veil, indeed. And I believe I spent too much time on her veil. After times comes her dress, a black robe. This one is fairly easy to see coming. The legend of the Grim Reaper being born during the 14th century, the time where the Black Plague was running rampant, it is only normal to describe the person who takes the soul of the dead away wearing the same black robe that the priest would wear during the funerary ceremonies. And finally, last and quite important part to it, the scythe. Now, I don't need to explain why the scythe, but let me explain why the scythe anyway, if that makes sense. Everybody knows that the scythe is usually associated to death and the Grim Reaper, but do you know why? I hope you do. It's pretty easy to know. The scythe is not a weapon. It is a tool used in agriculture to harvest crops, the same way a farmer would reap its field. The reaper harvests souls with this tool, especially, as I said, during a time as grim as the 14th century and its Black Death. Let's end this video on the biggest selling books of all times, the Bible itself. Now, before we start with the actual content of the Bible, let me give you a quick recap of what is the Bible. The Bible is a collection of religious texts or scriptures that are held to be sacred in Christianity, Judaism, and Samaritanism, and, well, in many other cultures, but mainly these two. Now, like it or not, Christianity had a major influence in our modern Occidental countries, going as deep as our subconscious and imaginary world. Let me quote the Bible on that. When the Lamb broke the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come." I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and he who sat on it had the name Death, and Hades was following him. Authority was given to them over a fourth of the earth, to kill with sword, and with famine, and with pestilence, and by the wild beasts of the earth. Death, the pale horse, fourth horseman of the apocalypse. Death is in fact the only horse who's named in the Bible. Its three brothers are only characterized by their implements and colors, and normally, don't have a name. Forget Chainsaw Man on that. Now, let's dissect the quote real quick. It is a quote from the book of Revelation, which is the last book of the New Testament and describes apocalyptic events which culminates in the second coming of Jesus. The Lamb is the victorious, the one whom, after his death, opened the seven seals and claims victory over his opponents. The Lamb opens the seven seals that guard the apocalypse. First comes the white horse and its horsemen coming forth to conquer. Second comes the red horse, and to him was given the power to strip away peace from humanity and make the men kill each other. The third came the black, and it was with him that came hunger and famine. And finally, the one we are interested in, the fourth man, the pale horse. It was followed by Hades. When I say Hades, though, I believe it would be good to clarify something. I'm not talking about the god. It is the world of the dead. You all heard about all the four horsemen I named above. The first one is usually named Conquest or Pestilence. The second usually is called War. The Black is the third, and it's usually named Famine. But the only one who's really named in the book is the fourth and last one, the Pale Horse, usually depicted holding a scythe, followed by Hades, Death. One which calls upon the end of the Roman Empire, the very impersonification of the end. Alright, this video was fun and all, and it was very much a pleasure to create. because there was a lot of things to say with just looking at the model and deciphering it. Let me know if you enjoyed it. I wish you a wonderful day, my dear deadbeats. I'll see you next time, and don't forget, Memento Mori.